Hello, hello, beautiful friends. Today's episode is a real sweet treat. Many of you may have, and if you haven't, by the end of this episode, you definitely will sit with, feel, journey with, and just be touched by the music, the magic, the medicine that East Forest shares with us, whether it's through his ceremonies, whether it's through his retreats, whether it's through his music. He's definitely supported me through many times and been a real vessel for me feeling my way through sometimes complete and utter joy and sometimes complete and utter heartbreak or despair. And so in this episode, for me, it was such an honor to be in live dialogue with East Forest himself and to really sense into the human being who is so devoted to being a vehicle for the muse, for being a vehicle for creativity and for creating space for deep listening and for returning home to compassion and to our truth. And so we explore threads of East Forest's relationship to the muse and how he navigates that relationship and also how his practice of music and creativity is really his own medicine as well, and what that looks like, and the journey of finding or really cultivating a practice of creativity or your relationship to the muse as your own medicine and offering that as a gift in a kind of way that David Whyte speaks to, and that to become human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To welcome in the wordless, to give space for, that which we're all hungry for, but just simply cannot touch. It's not an apple that we can eat to satiate, this real desire we have. It's something that is not physical whatsoever. And so how music and creativity and our relationship to the muse can really bring us into relationship with that yearning and allow it in and through us also then to become a gift to others. We also have some quite just, philosophical ponderings around paradox and the ways that we navigate the relationship to the muse and the wordless, the speechless, the kind of ever becoming placeless place, and the wild swings that we might experience in satiating the hunger for maybe the more than a human. And so usually I'd begin with a piece of poetry or prose to create space for the wordless, to point to maybe the essence of what it is that we're trying to touch on in an episode that words sometimes is challenged to touch on. But of course, in this episode and with East permission, we'll be opening with a piece from East Forest, Mind Karma, which has really moved me many times and in many ways. And so allow yourself to be washed through with a piece of East Forest's music and medicine, and then we'll see you in the conversation. Grab a tea, take a breath, notice the inhale, the exhale, and the space between. A moment in between moments. Here you are. You're listening to Spaces Between with your friend and host, L. Jeffrey. An open exploration into restoring connection in the 21st century in our personal lives, our relations, and our communities. What does it mean to live in relationship to the wholeness of who we are together? I'm not one for ads and am one for creating something beautiful with others, in this case, you. So if you enjoy our time together, I do invite you to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, rate and leave a review for the show. And if you're feeling super generous and fueled and filled up by our conversations, you might even consider donating or soon joining my Patreon membership. Just visit www.spacesbetweenpodcast.com, where you'll also find show notes and other useful links and resources following these conversations. So this is it. Let's dive in.
Our karma is our mind. mind stands in the way of a clear view of God. Our minds give us clouded perceptions.
All right. East Forest, thank you for taking the time. It feels like such an honor to be in dialogue, yet, of course, virtually, but to be in dialogue and to really connect. I feel like I've connected not just to you, but through you to something more in journeying and sitting with and just being with not so much just your music, your medicine over the last few years. And so it feels like such a gift to be in live dialogue with you. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, I could probably say the same thing to myself, like me too, you know, it's my own medicine, my own trip, and it's a really wild experience. It was particularly wild going to Australia and meeting people in a place to me that I'd never been to that is quite far away. And of course, we're all brothers and sisters on the planet, but I don't know, you just don't expect, it's just such a trip. They're like people out there, I was like, yeah, I know your music. And like you just said, I have my own experience with it. And I'm like, wow, that's really wild stuff. I wasn't even sure I'd have any fans out there. But I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was just cool to find like-minded community in the way that how connected we are on this planet right now.
Yeah.
With information, with anything we choose to be connected with, but it's remarkable.
Yeah. And I suppose for you, it must be just so humbling every time you do meet people who have experienced and really been with the medicine that's coming through you, and to sit with everyone's unique experience of it and just really, I suppose, alludes to the universal language that is vibration.
Well, it's the greatest thing on earth. It's like, I feel so fortunate because doing the music and doing like that creative process is what keeps me sane and keeps me feeling good. And so without, I think, that motivation, or I should say having that motivation of like it being a career or there's a relationship with other people out there that listen is so good because, versus not. I mean, I can't tell you how grateful I am. I have like the greatest job in the world. And it's been a very slow, progressive process entering into it. I mean, what I've done has always been the same and it's been very focused for a long, long time, but like it absolutely was not like some kind of overnight situation of like, now I'm in conversation with people in Australia, so to speak, right? Like, but at the end of the day, I value conversations like this. And I used to value when I was touring because it gives you the opportunity to meet other humans, other souls on the path, and just you kind of intersecting and exploring like, oh, we've intersected, right? And now we're just sort of get to vibe on that for a bit. Because largely, as a solo project, I'm alone. I'm here making things and just and that has a great value for me personally. But beyond that, when you hit send, so to speak, and you distribute music, that's when it begins for everyone else. But for me, there's an ending. I have to move on because there's a postpartum, like, what do you do? There's nothing to do. It's all about the creation. And now it's just sort of, I guess it's done. It's sort of like I plant the seed in the ground and now I have to walk away and let it be watered by the rain and just see what happens, see what grows. And I have to make more seeds.
Yeah. I was reading just a little piece by David White this morning, and he speaks about that, the kind of tidal force of creation coming through that kind of calls one to to be with it and move with it. And I mean, you can also not be with it and it just cause stagnation and a kind of tension or suffering. But when maybe we have found our path, whether it's music, whether it's writing, whether it's dance, but our kind of relationship to the muse, when that tidal force comes through and it just overwhelms you in a sense and takes over and kind of irons out maybe creases in our energetic or spiritual psycho system as well. And then when it's passed, it's just kind of a lull in a sense. And he was speaking to it more so through the lens of it being a personal transformation. You've been through a journey with the muse. And on the other side, there's this kind of feeling of an unfamiliar territory because you are kind of in a new epoch in time that you're not familiar with yet. But this dual experience when when that relationship to the muse is also then your offering and gift to the world for, as you said, for everyone else, it's like the beginning of the process for them. But for you, it's, a real, I don't know, for me, there's a sense of relief in my writing specifically. And I wonder how you feel, how you navigate that when it's someone's just entering into the cocoon, maybe, and you've just come out the other side. And just how is that for you to hold both your experience of maybe holding who you are now on the other side of that transformative journey with the muse, but also really holding someone who's actually just about to enter the passage that you've gone through as well?
I think David White's great, by the way. I mean, it just makes me think it's easier for me when I try not to think about there being a destination. And I don't even like to think about like I'm in a cocoon. It's more like it's just a process. And it's actually not even the cake itself. It's just sort of the icing and the accoutrements around it and in it and ingredients. And I create things, and we all do. And that's just part of my life. And the other parts are like, step parenting and taking care of my body and working with my mind is probably the biggest thing all the time, and all the other stuff we do. And so it's more like a practice that I just never want to fully put down because I've learned the hard way that if I do, it's maybe like David was saying, there's sort of this like constipation of energy in a sense. And I actually try to avoid things being like big bursts of energy because I know then there's a burnout. So I'd rather I'm in it for like the long run. It's like, I'd rather do little bits versus like burnout. Like just last week, I was down in Southern Utah studio and working 10 hours a day because I was only there for a particular amount of time. And so I was mixing and working every day a long time. And I was definitely getting burnt out. I was also really like jazzed up, but I knew I was like, this is not sustainable. Like there's going to be a burnout. It's almost like there's a price to pay. You're shooting too much oxytocin and creativity in the arm, and it's like, it feels great, but there's no way you could do this forever. So inevitably there's going to be a time soon where you're going to have to do less and it's going to feel different. Right. And it's like, so I'm much more interested in kind of the long race, so to speak.
Yeah. Like a more, kind of integrative.
Sustainability, how do we keep it going? How does it become like part of your daily practice as opposed to something that comes and goes? There's a phrase, I don't remember who said it, or it's some writers use it. Like, when does inspiration strike? They asked this writer. He says, at 10 a.m. when I sit down to write, it's like, I just go sit down, and some days it's better than others. But I mean, I'm the one who has to like have the discipline to work. And that's our choice. Like that's our will. And that's something you can be proud of or have control over, is how much you choose to sit down and put pen to paper or whatever it is, whatever the practice is. What comes out, I don't know. That I don't know where that comes from or who's responsible for it. But like honing your skill and sharpening your tools, you are responsible for. And that's something you can be proud of.
Yeah. And to really, honor that discipline in a way. I really feel the requirement for a discipline to allow then the absolute unknowing and emergent nature of the muse and creativity and not knowing at all what's going to come out the other side, but that there is a kind of I don't want to say structure, but there's a form and then there's the flow, and it's up to us to create the kind of containers for us then to be taken away in a sense, because it's medicine for ourselves, and it's also in large part can be our gift for the world. But the discipline to sit down and really honor this time as a practice to really allow the muse to come through. Yeah. But it's such a...
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's totally a practice, man. And I've just gotten used to over the years, if anything, of sort of trusting that it has these ebbs and flows and it's a process, and trying not to attach to them too much. So I see them, but if anything, there's a familiarity to it where it's like, oh, this is when I can feel despondent, or like it's lost. I'm like, yeah, I know that feeling. That's normal. That's part of this I'm in the creative process. Like I'm in the process right now where I'm probably at the sort of the mixing latter stages of a record, where parts of it are from 2 years ago. So it's a longer journey. And that can be intoxicating because you're starting to see the sculpture right in front of you. And it's a very different feeling when you just have a big block of stone. You're like, I have no idea what this is going to look like. And it's so monotonous to be chipping away at it. But you know from history, like, I know that's how it's done. That is the process. I have to just get up and chip a bit. And sometimes, you don't like what you do. It doesn't matter. You just go the other direction, but then it informs the process and it makes a new thing.
Yeah. And being in constant relationship to which is what I'm hearing and you're sharing, is the more you practice, of course, the more the sensitivity builds to your relationship to the muse. And there's a philosopher, Martin Buber, that I really enjoy, talks about the I-thou rather than the I-it relationship. The I-it being kind of an objectification of whether it's another person, whether it's our creativity, whether it's our work. But when you treat it as an it, or just an object, a thing you do, and you can tick it when it's done, you strip it of its life force, but also you kind of strip it of your ability to be moved by it and in relationship to it. But the I-thou is kind of, you're in this dialogue with whatever it is that you're in relationship with. And there's this real humility and kind of sensitivity about how it's informing you and you're informing it, and you're just dancing.
At its best, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I feel if anything, it's just like my meat puppet. I'm just trying to like get through it. And I have all sorts of ridiculous thoughts going through my head. And it's just compassion that I try to have with the surface level elements of my humanity, and not trying to so much push it out of the way, but just be like, sort of like, that's, hey, that's okay. That can be there too. And divinity can speak alongside that or through it or with it. I'm not here to like kind of the way we started this podcast or the way I record, I actually try to make it highly casual because I don't want, my mind is the thing that's wanting to like create that ritualistic structure. I'm like, hey, but that's just, then I'm overthinking it. That the one thing I'm trying to do is not think about it. So the more I can step into it with a sense of ease, like it's nothing. We're just throwing colors against the wall. And it's like, that's when things can speak through because I'm not stopping it. It's very difficult to say, I'm going to have a very important conversation, or I'm going to write an amazing song and sit down and do it. Good luck. Or I'm going to write like the best page right now. It's like you have to like go through the process of making a mess a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little, I suppose, following that thread of making a mess and building kind of the sensitivity, the grit, the resilience, the compassion, like building our capacity to hold more of what is, essentially, to be okay in the mess and to really be okay in it all. I'm curious if you could just note a few, like in your journey to being in maybe more of an intentional relationship with the muse, with consciousness, then with sound, and then with ceremony, and now the work that you're really living through. Just to note a little bit of the kind of stream of your epiphanies or revelations or journey to now.
Wow, that's a big question. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I think for all of us, our experience of looking out our eyes into the world is so utterly personal and unique. And we can't know if other people's perception of consciousness is the same as ours. I mean, I guess I would guess it is, but I never will know. I will never know, let alone all this stuff like, is it real? Is it a dream? All these kinds of things. So my perception of consciousness has definitely shifted over the years, particularly the last like 10 to 15 years. But it's really like there's layers of, what's a good analogy? You could sort of like, let's just say the surface of the ocean is where your eyes meet the sky. That's the world. And you're kind of, so you're lying underneath that, your consciousness, and you go down the layers, the fathoms of your consciousness into the ocean. And on that surface there, which is where most of things are, like, I need to make lunch. Oh, I have to do this task. I'm going to make a list. I have to go to the bathroom now. I'm thinking about the thing. There's a lot of suffering in there for me, and maybe for other people, I don't know. But it's a lot, used to be much, much worse, because when I grew up, that was all of it. That was my complete identification with reality. And certain experiences broke me through that, but particularly some psychedelic experiences were the first ones where I just dove into the Marianas Trench and I was like, oh, that's down there, and it's connected to the same water. It's just deeper and different and richer and alien. And it just started to show me that there was more. And I started to get very hungry for different thought lines and reality tunnels and modes of consciousness and all the different wonderful teachers out there, particularly like Terence McKenna and Ram Dass, and musicians and artists. It just started to open my mind. And that opening of my consciousness, you realize, is not, again, a destination. It's the richness comes in recognizing that the process itself is one of unfolding, of breathing, of being in one place but no place. And so it's sort of like I'm falling in and out of it, as I'd imagine we all are, all the time. And it's less my trying to attach to a place and more of my wanting to witness this process. And now I'm more interested, like, how much love and compassion can I bring to a process, even when I know that I could be doing more. I could always be doing more. My practice of whatever it is could be deeper. And it's more like, where is there to go? How many years do I have left? And we're in this incarnation. And for all I know, truth be told, all I know is this incarnation. I resonate with the ideas of reincarnation, but I don't know. I can't know. And at times of like COVID and stuff, we're all facing a form of a near-death experience. And I'm facing that my own way and how it makes me think in a closer way about mortality. And I was the kind of person that thought about death almost every day. I think about it in different ways. It's not something I talk about a lot, but I know it just came up in my consciousness a lot. And it was something I explored in different ways to try to like get closer to it and learn about it. And so these sorts of things, I hope they make you more alive. And to be more alive is to be more present. And to be more present is typically through the breath. But in the meantime, while I'm in the monkey suit, in my space suit, spending like my brain time and my physical time doing music creation and sort of this wellness ecosystem of East Forest is just frankly me following the golden rule, which is, if I want to feel infinite, try to make other people feel infinite. If I want to feel held or known by the universe, try to convey that to others. So there's a selfishness to that, where I know that that's what keeps my head on straight. And I've gone through some really serious depressions in my life, starting when I was a child. And so I'm just trying to learn like what works for me in modernity.
Thanks for sharing. It's yeah, I suppose the piece I resonate with is that piece around selfishness. And I find there's such especially in like my generation, maybe the purpose economy, where there is a real pull and there is a real necessity to be of service. But there's like growing up with the kind of messaging that it is up to you, and it can be really hard on ourselves. And we feel like whilst ecocentricity and cosmic centricity, and it is important to be very, beyond ourselves or more than self as well. But there's kind of an inherent, or at least in my experience, guilt then of owning our own desires and needs and then somehow not okay anymore. But again, that's just still kind of based in a kind of a split in saying that my needs aren't the world's needs, or my true needs when I am in my authenticity, my truth, those needs, like there are really is no separation or divide between those needs and maybe the needs of those around me. And so if I am really in my integrity and my truth, it's okay to own my needs. It's okay to come from that place of I'm doing this because it's my medicine too. And when it's from that place, then there's just no need for that guilt around being world-centric. Would that be your experience? I'm just curious about and for those listening as well, the kind of guilt that I witness people experiencing in saying the kind of selfishness rather than just honoring what's here and what's our own medicine.
Well, what comes up for me when I hear that is there's a danger in that as well, in that I think typically when one is on a path of, let's call it awakening or revelation, the inner insight, it typically you move into a form of service because there's really nothing else to do. And you realize that helping others is helping yourself. It's sort of the same thing. You have less of that sense of separation. And we live in an era that's exacerbated by forms of social media and cultural shifts where it's a very me ecosystem. It can be an echo chamber where that is harmful, I believe, to say like, my needs matter more, because they probably don't. I mean, on the level of like, of course they do, in the sense that you can't really be a wounded healer, and but you have to walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't think it's an either or. It's like, you got to do your work, and you want to think about your place in the world and in society and in your community at the same time. And that's really the human experience. It's a both and. And we also are going through, at least here in the States, and I think it's pretty global, I would guess, a cultural and racial revolution where it's forcing a lot of people to look at the vestiges of privilege and how that's, I mean, I'm certainly a product of that. I don't think I'd be talking to you if I didn't have some of the opportunities I had growing up that has a long chain that brought me to this place. And what do I do with that, right? And that's something that I have to learn and work with. That again is a process. It's not like I can have a destination necessarily with that, but the recognition of it is important. And the recognition that for all of us, what does it mean to be collective, and kind of proving to ourselves that we're inherently connective people. We're inherently social and cooperative, and believing that and trusting in it and experimenting with it and showing ourselves that we can cultivate an abundance. And there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of assholes out there. But I don't want to label them as assholes. They're just super lost, But they're always going to be out there, and it's not your job to fix everybody. I really believe in law number 9 of the 10 laws, which is always disallow foolishness, which is like, look, there's foolish action out there and fools. It's like, you don't have, just get away from it. You don't have to go in there. And it's like, it's important to be like, that's foolish. I don't have time for this, Yeah. You don't want to put wood on the fire, so to speak. So look, that's not really an answer to what you're saying, because I don't know if there is an answer. But I know for myself, I do see a bit of some people, they get a little lost in their own worlds, but at the same time, you can't deny that you have an inner world that, as we said, is you are the protagonist of this epic journey, whether you like it or not. So denying that and just being some people use service as a way of avoiding their inner life, you know. Of course, there's infinite paths, infinite possibilities. That is the richness of this whole journey.
Yeah. And I suppose I noted that, not for an answer, I'm just super curious. I mean, in the notion of the spaces between, I'm really curious about what does it mean to really have grace in living and existing within ultimate paradox, which is the notion that in this flesh body, with this mind and a prefrontal cortex, we do have a selfhood. And at the same time, we are inherently embedded in relation. And so how do we navigate that and honor self and honor deep humility and reverence for all that we are embedded in? And of course, there's no answer for it. It's just this constant, subtle kind of discernment and sensitivity in my experience. Yeah. And I just witness a kind of, a pull towards collectivism, which is brilliant. But if we don't also honor the self, for me, there's an opportunity for shadow to come out.
Well, it'll come out either way. I mean, that's why we're here. It makes me think of, I was talking to Bayo Akomolafe on my podcast, and he has this wonderful way of describing sort of like that we are a becoming. We are a becoming. Or he had this phrase that the invitation is still being made. And these are sort of koans in a sense, where it's like, you know, what does that mean? And that's the point. The art and poetry and any form of art is dancing around it, because that's the only thing we can do. And every time we try to put our finger on it with our mind, our words, unless it's poetic in a sense, it's impossible. And that there's an unrequitedness of that. And that's why I think when we get out of our minds in a static state, whether it's through exercise or meditation or orgasm or deep creativity, or when we're listening to things that are sort of transdimensional like music, it feeds that hunger in a way that can only be satiated with something non-corporal. Like the food we actually desire is not something, you know, that is even dimensional, that grows on a tree. You know? But we're continually hungry. We forget. And so it's like, what do we feed ourselves with? And it's the way it seems that we're meant to be in this whole campus that we're on is to sleep and to wake, to be hungry, to be satiated, and so forth and so on. So it appears that the engine of it is the yin yang. It's falling off and coming back on. So if that is the point, you're not going to escape that. So it's sort of watching it, witnessing it. How do I play with that momentum? I feel like becomes more interesting because you're working with the energy of the operating system you're in, as opposed to trying to do something that's not even part of that. There's a lot of talk from people about transcending your ego, or you know, this amelioration of pain and enlightenment, and that's a fool's errand, in my opinion. And I could be a fool for saying that. I could absolutely be my hubris. I don't ask anyone to believe anything I'm saying. It's all metaphor, and I don't know. But my heart tells me that's true.
Human becomings. Or just becomings.
Yeah, Bayo's the dude. I mean... We've been on email. And talking, it was like he was singing to my heart. And I couldn't tell him why. You know, but it's like, I don't know why this is so satisfying to me, because you're actually not saying anything. You know, like, but that's somehow really good.
Yeah. It just reminds me of another quote by David White that just really speaks to that for me, which is that to be human is to become visible while carrying that which is hidden as a gift to others.
Yeah, it makes you think. That's so good.
But to invite or create space for the transpersonal, the other realms to exist in this realm. And it seems like, that's that apple that we're just trying to find, is like that unsatiated desire for the otherworldly, the other
the
realms
yearning
in
to
which
be with God. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's to return home to what you are. Of course, that's there, and it's not hard though to get in touch with that. It's just something that you do over and over again. I mean, we do it. It can happen while washing dishes. I mean, it doesn't have to be an ayahuasca ceremony. It's just there's so many myriad ways. And you're the painting behind you. It speaks to you in a certain way, and then you receive that through the breath and keep going. It's like God seeing God revealing itself over and over again. It's like a game of peekaboo, and there's a joy in the remembering. And by being able to forget, you're able to remember. And if you weren't able to forget, we would just be in this bliss state of all that is. There'd be no purpose to this dualistic, energetic state that we are in.
Yeah.
There would be no purpose. We would just be floating bliss beings, which is fine. Maybe that's what it all is, like on the octaves above us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there seems to be that's the becoming that bio is echoing in a sense. And I feel that to be true, and I can only honor it and sing to it. And while I'm in the trenches of my humanity at the same time, and that's what we all are doing.
Yeah, really curious about when you are holding ceremony all you're doing is creating the space for a deep listening, a deep remembering, that returning. And I'm just curious, as a kind of facilitator, a steward, a guide in that space, I suppose I'm curious about what can we all learn, as we're all guides and all stewards. In every single interaction, we have an opportunity to create that space, a micro moment of deep listening, a micro moment of returning together. Yeah, I was curious to hear about is there anything you do very intentionally in those spaces as you hold and guide to really open up and to constantly calibrate the openness in the field that you're in?
Well, I guess there are things I do, some of them very physical and mundane, and some of them more practices that are internal. There's things like protecting and clearing the space, and there's basic mechanisms for that. And then there's ways that I prepare physically, like my friend he's helped me produce every ceremony I've done for the last 11 years. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for him, because he was the one who kind of forced me into it. And he recently was the one who asked me to do the virtual ones when COVID hit in March. And he just sort of like, we're doing it this Saturday. And I was like, well, how? How's this going to work? He's like, I don't know. You're going to do the blah. He just pushes me on stage, kind of.
Yeah.
And we were talking about doing another one recently, and he's just like, yeah, I mean, it's no big deal, right? Let's do it. And I say, bro, I have to rehearse. He's like, I thought you just improvise. I'm like, I do, but I rehearse to improvise. Like, it's a muscle I have to work up. It's like running a marathon, and I have to do that for weeks every day just to feel like ready to step into that space. And that's very mundane. And that's very much so I can not be thinking too much about the knobs and the things, which I'm always thinking about, but I'm actually more just like not attaching to it. And more than anything, it's being in that space again of witnessing, because I have like thoughts like everybody else that come up. I lose my way and I find my way. I go through these waves, and it's less of me saying, oh, damn it, I'm not supposed to do that. Like, I'm supposed to be whatever I think it is. And I deride myself. And now it's more like expecting that and watching that show go by. And having compassion and holding it. There's a distance to it. And allowing, and it's sort of like we talked about trusting the process of making a record or something. It's like, I know that process. It's like, there it is. And I expected this. And it's sort of like, I expect the child to have a tantrum at some point, but they'll come around, so let it burn out and just keep going. Just keep going. And something larger is speaking through, hopefully, that has nothing to do with any of that. And it's something that's shared between you and me and everybody else. And I'm a vehicle for it as much as anyone else is. And I don't make all those decisions. You know, it's working through us as a substrate of the universe as much as anything else is. And people have certain synchronicities with it that they might report to me, and I just feel like, wow, I was an instrument in that as much as anyone, and that's really cool. But it's like I didn't design that in my mind, but I stepped up to the plate, and I specifically opened myself, like whether it's through invocation or whatever it is, to allow very specific things to come through. But I don't know what those things are. I can't. But I ask for guidance from that which I need guidance from. And I do a lot with my body and my mind to prepare it, just like you would for any sort of act. So there's a lot of that. I mean, maybe that's 80% of it is body and mind stuff. And it's all about just feeling casual and loose and prepared and calm.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of organized, but organized and improvised nature to it.
Yeah, it's a totally improvised experience musically. And when you do that, this is just the ceremony space we're talking about, ceremony concerts. And concert's a weird word because it's not really a concert. But it's not something I ever thought anyone would be interested in, frankly, outside of being high on mushrooms. Because I used to think 10 years ago, I was like, oh, well, people only like my music if they're high.
Yeah.
I was convinced. I was like, because that's all I did was I played ceremonies. And I was like, I felt really good about it. But I was like, look, inside that space, as long as it's coming from the heart, it works. You know, you could have no musical skill. And if you sing a song you make it up and it's really from your heart, really, that's what's resonating. And it taught me a lesson that I needed to let go of more and more my judgment or perception of like, oh, this has to be musically XYZ, you know, because the only thing that matters is the intention and the derivation of where it's coming from. That's everything. It's everything, you know, and, you know, my mind can get into it like, oh, I want that to be better musically or this or that, or this is off key or that thing is the beat's not very good or interesting, and that's why I don't like to play things I've played before, really, because it's immediately in a place of trying to replicate something. So it's only comparison. You're comparing to something you did before, and it just sort of falls flat. It doesn't have that same energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with after, whether it's facilitating a retreat or immersion, and people come up and thank you and share their own epiphanies and just have no idea what I shared or what came through at that point. And so it's just this absolute kind of surprise and just like, wow, maybe I should. And this is I suppose the point about it being our own medicine as well. Like it's fine-tuning our vehicle and our vessel as we're in the space. And so oftentimes it's like, wow, like I feel moved and changed by this as well, equally as much as everyone, but in a different sense. And I suppose I'm wondering, as a way of kind of informing what kind of a cultural stewardship could look like in terms of the way that we lead or sit in, be in our interactions together and just a normal day-to-day life. What can we learn from, say, ceremony and these experiences that we're talking of? And or is it something you feel is such an intensity of experience and requires so much presence and attunement that it needs to be in like strong containers, very intentional spaces? Or how can we bring micro moments of that start reweaving a culture that is based on deep reverence, intention, and listening?
I think for me, it's helped me learn how to listen. And listening to me is done through the breath. So, you know, it kind of helps me bring in those micro moments being a breath. And that breath, like feeling really connected and deep and completely enriched as much as it was in a peak moment in a ceremony. But I'm taking the garbage out. And I'm like, oh, now that's the juice, you know, like, because not the garbage juice, but like the cosmic juice. like that's to me the most interesting thing is when life becomes a breathing and living meditation that I'm just kind of going in and out of. I don't want it to be separate.
Mm.
I don't want to have special time and then I go into quote real life. It's just all one conversation and one dance. And these acute moments of ceremony can really teach us by showing us things and having a practice is a way to, I suppose, keep your muscles in shape.
Mm.
But to me, the name of the game is how it breathes into your waking consciousness all the time, because there isn't anything else. Like the more you remember, you're remembering all the time.
Mm.
I think that's a sign of a sense. I don't want to say progress, dare I say that, but like that's why a lot of people surround themselves with sacred items or objects or paintings or wear certain things because it's constantly reminding you.
Mm.
It's not just an accoutrement of to be like, I'm in the club, which I guess it kind of is, but you can use it as a tool. And music is the same thing. I mean, music can be very powerful to really emotionally just like take you there, right?
Mm.
So it's more like a magic carpet you can get on. And it's like, where do I want to go? What music do I put on? And that's the kind of world we live in these days where you have infinite music practically to choose from at any moment. And you have all these options and choices. And it's like, what shade of the red pill or the blue pill, what do I want to take in this moment? Yeah. It's amazing. I think we just need to bring more consciousness to that process. It's like you're choosing all the time.
Mm.
You are always choosing your path. And things happen to you, but you still have your hand on that wheel of that ship. And so we need to empower ourselves to remember that all these micro decisions are the way you build your consciousness.
Mm. Yeah, and when we say you are choosing, it's because I suppose the invert of that is also we are not choosing at all. But there is a higher we that is choosing. And so having a tether to that, to be able to kind of draw in our faculties, the heart, mind, intuition, the spirit, the soul, the we is choosing. And so to have for me, it's also just so much about slowing down. Like you move half as fast, you notice twice as much. And the more we notice, the more faculties we have to choose wisely and take a kind of wise, compassionate action. And so to bring those kind of micro moments of ceremony or intentional, rejoice and communion is, for me, a matter of just slowing down. Like, stop the conversation you're having. Start it again.
And there's a paradox to it all in the sense like we are choosing or you are choosing. I think it's both. And it is a paradox. And I think that is the point. Like we have the ability to have destiny and we choose it. How does that work? It's like, exactly. But they're both true.
Yeah.
And I guarantee that, my heart is screaming at me that it's true that like the choices I make matter. And I don't believe that like there's some notion like, well, I really don't have free will and it's all predetermined. It's like, if it is, I know that in some mysterious way, I'm also dreaming it up and making it happen with every choice I make. So it's like, it's not predetermined in the way we think about time, but it doesn't absolve ourselves of responsibility. Like, I think we're highly responsible and highly important to the unfolding of the creation of what comes next. And these are big meta philosophical ideas, but it really comes down to like what your relationship is of yourself inside your heart and that connection to inside your mind and how that turns into the world. I mean, that is your decision. No one can change that. Everyone's trying to influence it constantly, but it's your decision.
Yeah, and no one will also really know the qualities of that connection, the kind of inherent infidelity and, again, in a sense, aloneness in our own experience. Like, in some sense, it is really up to us to take the kind of existential reins of our being in this world, in this flesh body. And at the same time, to be tethered to something in which we're all deeply connected to.
You can ask for help and, you are never outside all that is. Like, if you want to call that God or love, I mean, if you take that notion. It's like you can't be lost. You aren't separate. And so it's okay to inherently, we live in a world that's exacerbating feelings of separateness. And that separateness is the root of our pain. And so all the things you can do to feel more connected to others, to the world, to nature, to the cosmos, to your community, those are all the things that are going to get you like plugged back in and feeling really alive and connected to your soul and your path.
Yeah. Can I ask what some of those things are for you? Like some of the practices you turn to, say you're having a day just swimming in the mess of the creative process. And whilst you can welcome the mess in, but what are some of the things that for you, the practices or rituals that help you either just be in right relationship with the mess or maybe start to declutter and swim to greater kind of clarity or tether to source?
Well, that creative process I mentioned is a big part of it. And let's say that just doesn't feel good. Like it's more about letting go of that feeling and those results, because it doesn't feel good some days. It's like, boy, that was crap. But it's like, it's more about, I'm proud that I sat down to do anything. And, we all have our little hacks that we do to bring ourselves back to center, whether that's, for me, it's, talking things out or, really trying to get to the truth of it, or going on a walk or being in nature, alone time, or sometimes the opposite, it's connecting with a friend, having that sense of connection, feeling meaningful, doing things that are nourishing. I'm a big sauna fan. There's multitude things, and sometimes none of it works. And sometimes, I think since COVID's hit, I've had a couple, at least 2, maybe 3 moments of like deep despair, whether or not it's about COVID or whatever, where things just kind of like piled up. And eventually I was like, I can't get out of this. And it starts to just rabbit hole, snowball. And that's a terrible, terrible, terrible feeling. And unfortunately, it's something I'm very familiar with growing up. But it's like looking through the world with a completely different lens. And I know when you're there, that's everything. Like that's the totality of that lens. And I just have, for whatever grace comes upon me for other people to kind of help me or speak to me, or those which are non-physical that help me, or whatever process is working through me karmically or in the background that I need to burn through. I don't understand it fully, but I try not to be like afraid of that, even though I am. I mean, I try to be more curious and trust in whatever tools I have, fuck that. Like trust in the people and things that can help me. Trust in the grace that can fall upon me, because I will fall again, probably many, many times, sadly. But I'm still here. I'm still going, still kicking, and still creating. And there's been many times where I, could have not been.
Yeah, I just thank you for your absolute humility. It was also just the other day, I was going for a run, and I mean, personally, growing up as a queer man in a straight world as well, I had many bouts of, suicidal ideation and planning, and my own version of deep despair and heartbreak. And for some reason, it was actually Mind Karma that I was listening to. Oh. And I was just envisioning, and I was in really high spirits in the morning for some reason. So I was smiling and glowing, but envisioning my funeral and envisioning a piece of art or music that I had created for those who would come to my funeral that was all about welcoming them into my experience of life, to let them know that this was the heartbreak, the density, the tension that I was experiencing. And yeah, crying and running through the forest, but glowing, but witnessing that, and just had the remembrance that I don't have to wait till my funeral to share the music or the creation of the despair of my life to welcome people in. And that it's actually maybe in allowing the despair, the heartbreak, the density to fuel creation along the way that will be my own release, my own medicine, and also let people in that might actually stop me from the kind of desire maybe to take one's life. It was just a big kind of revelation of flipping the picture and just noticing me the kind of desire to share the density of what I'm going through, but post kind of choosing to leave and realizing actually, like, this is the process. This is the medicine to choose this, to welcome this in, to have this be a gift to myself and to others as I'm in the density, as a way of also welcoming people in.
Yeah, it's like the gift in the bitter medicine. I think about that with COVID and, what are the gifts in the bitter medicine? And they are becoming, they are revealing themselves, and they will continue to be revealed and to emerge. But we're so focused on a destination with that too, sort of an after. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. It's most definitely another form of becoming. But I think the more we can think about how not to push things away or not to hide things away is important, because more than likely we all share a lot of this. These are core human experiences, and we don't. Anytime, one of the reasons perhaps things like social media are so dangerous is because you're literally looking through a lens, a filter at other people's lives, and it's just a piece. It's just like a PR event of your life. And so any form of comparison is kind of ridiculous. It only brings pain typically. And to share your humanity helps us sing the song together and to say, we can do this. We can do this in a way it's real and it's going to happen. We're all going to trip up. It's inevitable, but we'll take turns, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm so curious also. Maybe, let's open the can and see. I'm curious about I suppose your teachers and guides. Obviously, you mentioned Terence McKenna, obviously Ram Dass. Whose shoulders are you standing on, and who do you turn to, and your current teachers and guides, and of course, still in this physical form or not, but who are your current teachers and guides that you really turn to and feel held and supported by?
Well, certainly Maharaji and Neem Karoli Baba. And then I have friends like my friend Court Johnson, who's the voice of 10 Laws, who's kind of is an elder in my life and just a trickster teacher. And there's many others, but I'm kind of someone who, growing up, always resisted authority and hated being told what to do. And so I've always sort of resisted to a strict lineage. It's sort of an anathema to me. I was like, I want to piece it together myself, which is a bit of a sickness of the West and modern life. But that's, for me, the shamanic traditions and nature being my biggest teachers, sort of direct experience was really, really important to me. And is the only thing that really actually spoke to me. The rest of it spoke about it and was important, but I wanted to learn from that direct experience. And I feel that from music, and that's why I find music to be useful for me. I really enjoy listening to it, but I also really enjoy being in the process of creating it on many different levels. And so I stand on the shoulders of infinite giants, and there's too many to name. But as I said before, I recognize the kind of privilege that I have and I've been given to do what I do. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And I just wish that I can speak to and offer tools and experiences for people that feel inclusive. I want to build bridges from my heart to others and from their hearts to others and into themselves, and to allow that to do the work it needs to do that I am not in charge of, that I'm simply planting those seeds that will germinate and do what they do. And, whatever people do with it, that's what's amazing. That's what is to be really proud of, is what they're doing. I'm just making little songs and podcasts and talks and things, retreats, whatever it is. So But I have a lot to learn, and I'm always learning and always picking up from different people, and I have a long way to go. So I continue the journey and kind of keep my eyes wide open.
Yeah. I suppose, again, just speaks to I'm very much the same in terms of the direct experience being, for me, the most empowering and integrated teacher for me that I've experienced. And I'm like, teachings, whether it's books or guides, support me in mentalizing or putting language around what maybe my being has felt through a direct experience. But it's the direct experience itself that just repatterns something in me that makes total sense, but without knowing really why.
Yeah. There's musicians who've been like teachers for me, I feel like, and I learn more in some ways from them just through the music, not through any words.
Mm-hmm.
Some pianists like Bill Evans and Keith Jarrett, and these are guys that I don't know. They definitely feel like teachers. Of course, I've never met Keith, and Bill's dead, but their music, there's a depth to it of experience and humanity and such a richness and diversity. And being inspired, I think, is really important, because we're all hopefully inspiring each other in different ways. And that helps us like motivate one another and sort of like lend a hand and say, come, you can come this way, showing the way. And then someone else inspires that person, and so forth and so on. And that's something you can gift to other people, is to think about like looking for those little moments. Maybe you're even just inspiring someone with a smile or gifting them a little extra time.
Yeah.
Those are amazing things.
Yeah. Well, I feel we could just keep going on. There's so many little corridors I'd love to wander down together, but it is getting late for you.
It's getting a little late out here. Yeah, my voice is getting a little tired.
I did notice. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm ready to launch into the day on my side. So yeah, I suppose as a way of just rounding or like pulling, ending with a sense of wholeness or resolution, is there anything that you feel to share to those who are on their journey of coming home and remembering, listening in during this time?
I would just say, keep going, keep walking. You can do it. You can do it. And you're exactly where you need to be. You're exactly perfect in who you are. And everything you've done has led into this next breath, and you're no further away than your next breath from total ease. And you can give that to yourself. It's okay. Even if everything's wrong, you can still go there just for a breath. And you don't have to have a PhD in spirituality or have swept the ashram floor for 20 years. It's like, that's your right. And it's actually right there. And to believe that we can do this, whatever that means. And I don't mean that we arrive to a place and it's all over. I just mean like we can step forward with more grace, and we can ask for more grace and be given more grace than we maybe know what we can hold. And so it's to echo that prayer to everyone else, so I hear it myself. And when I speak it now, I feel it to be true in my heart. Even with the doubt in my mind, it rings true louder.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, East, for, again, just for the absolute humility. And I really feel it's lovely to really be in, living dialogue and to sense what I've always felt as such humility and genuinity behind what comes through you. And for me, I experience it as a deep permission to just, as you said, to be in this next breath and to be so fully in this human experience and this incarnation. And so it's such an honor to be able to share in conversation. And thank you, dearly for your devotion to creation and to music and to vibration during this time and transformation that we're all moving through.
Well, thanks for taking the time to chat. It's been fun.
What questions are still whirring inside for you? What landed and rung loudly for you? Let's take a moment. Thank you for joining me for another life-affirming and enriching conversation, each one a light, a torch to guide us on our path to being in right relationship with ourselves, those we walk with, and the ecologies we are very much a part of. I trust this has gifted you something to place in your toolkit to support you in your journey and your leadership. Make sure to connect with me and leave any comments on my Facebook or Instagram page at @ljeffrey, and check out the links in the show notes. This show is completely funded by listeners just like you, so if you feel generous and wish to be part of nourishing these inquiries that we're exploring together, you can leave a once-off donation or soon subscribe to my Patreon membership. Show notes, resources, and donations are all at www.spacesbetweenpodcast.com. Until next time, remember, we can't rush our way back. Notice connections and tend to the sweet, sweet spaces between. Lots of love.